Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
Throughout history, indigenous African warriors developed a variety of formidable military strategies to defend their homelands from invaders, utilizing terrain, guerrilla tactics, and specialized weapons. Among these weapons, poisoned arrows became one of the most feared and effective tools of warfare. The use of poison-tipped projectiles was not merely a crude or desperate measure, but rather an advanced biochemical application of botanical and zoological knowledge, refined over centuries. The indigenous peoples of Africa, particularly those from regions such as the Sahel, the Congo Basin, West Africa, and the Great Lakes region, mastered the art of crafting and applying potent poisons to their arrows, making them deadly instruments against both colonial and indigenous adversaries. The potency of these poison arrows often turned the tide of battles, striking fear into enemy ranks and ensuring that even a minor wound could prove fatal. From resisting European colonial incursions to defending against trans-Saharan raiders and rival kingdoms, African warriors skillfully employed poisoned arrows as a means of maintaining sovereignty over their lands. By analyzing historical records, oral traditions, and modern research into the biochemical compositions of these poisons, we can uncover the rich history of how Black natives used this lethal technology in their resistance against foreign and domestic threats. The use of poisoned arrows dates back thousands of years in Africa, with evidence of their usage found in ancient cave paintings, oral traditions, and archaeological discoveries. Various communities, from the San people of southern Africa to the Fawn warriors of Dahomey, integrated this technique into their warfare strategies. Poisoned arrows were typically made by extracting toxins from plants, venomous animals, and even decaying biological matter. The knowledge of which substances were most effective was passed down through generations, safeguarded by specialists who held expertise in botany and toxicology long before such sciences were formally recognized in the West. In the dense forests of Central Africa, warriors derived deadly poisons from plants such as strophanthus, which contains toxic cardiac glycosides capable of stopping a heart within minutes. Meanwhile, the famous arrow poison tree, Acacanthera oppositifolia, was a staple among the Zulu and other South African tribes, ensuring that even a glancing hit could lead to systemic organ failure. Similarly, the Himba and Herero people of Namibia extracted potent substances from beetles and poisonous frogs, creating a cocktail of lethal chemicals that made their arrows nearly unstoppable. The application of poisons was a meticulous process that required both skill and precision. After dipping the arrow tips into the toxic mixture, warriors often let them dry or coated them with a binding agent, such as animal fat, to ensure that the venom would adhere properly and not lose potency before being used in battle. The efficiency of this technique was unparalleled in African warfare, as it allowed for devastating long-range attacks and psychological warfare against enemies who knew that even a small wound could lead to excruciating death. The use of poisoned arrows played a pivotal role in African resistance movements against external aggressors. European colonial powers, Arab slavers, and rival African states all found themselves at the receiving end of this deadly innovation. During the trans-Saharan slave trade, powerful kingdoms such as Mali, Songhai, and Kanem-Bornu had to fend off nomadic raiders who sought to capture and sell their people into slavery. The defenders often relied on poisoned arrows to weaken enemy forces before engaging in hand-to-hand combat. Since many of these raiders wore minimal armor, a well-placed poisoned arrow was often enough to incapacitate them within moments. The arrival of European colonists in the 15th century introduced new challenges for African warriors. Armed with firearms and cannons, European forces sought to dominate the continent through military campaigns. However, indigenous warriors countered this advantage with poisoned arrows that turned even minor skirmishes into lethal encounters. For example, during the Wars of Resistance against the Portuguese in Angola, Queen Zinga's forces used poisoned arrows to strike fear into Portuguese soldiers. Her warriors, often concealed in dense forests, launched surprise attacks that left entire regiments crippled before they could react. Similarly, in the 19th century, the Zulu kingdom under Shaka Zulu incorporated poisoned arrows into their arsenal, supplementing their famous short stabbing spears and tactical battle formations. In West Africa, the Ashanti Empire fiercely resisted British imperial forces using various indigenous weapons, including poisoned arrows. The Ashanti warriors, renowned for their military prowess, often dipped their arrows in plant-derived toxins that inflicted slow, agonizing deaths upon their enemies. Their strategic use of archery forced British forces to rethink their approach, as traditional battle formations proved ineffective against the swift and deadly strikes of these weapons. Further south, the Khoisan hunter-gatherers of southern Africa perfected the use of poisoned arrows against European settlers, such as the Dutch Boers. Their extensive knowledge of local flora allowed them to create some of the most potent arrow poisons ever documented. When Dutch settlers encroached upon their lands, the Khoisan warriors launched swift and calculated attacks, ensuring that even a minor arrow wound meant certain death within hours. Beyond their lethal capability, poisoned arrows also provided a significant psychological advantage. The mere knowledge that an arrow could cause inevitable death instilled deep fear within invading forces. European soldiers who were unfamiliar with these poisons often panicked upon being struck, believing themselves doomed even when they suffered minor injuries. This psychological warfare weakened enemy morale, making African resistance more formidable. Tactically, poisoned arrows allowed for strategic hit-and-run attacks that neutralized numerical superiority. Unlike conventional weapons that required direct confrontation, arrows enabled warriors to strike from hidden positions, inflict casualties, and retreat before enemies could mount an effective counterattack. This method was particularly effective in forested and mountainous regions, where African fighters could maximize their environmental advantages. The use of poisoned arrows by indigenous African warriors was a sophisticated and highly effective form of warfare that enabled them to resist powerful invaders for centuries. The scientific knowledge behind these poisons, the skillful application of toxic substances, and the strategic execution of archery-based combat ensured that African societies remained formidable opponents against colonial and imperial threats. Despite the eventual military advancements of European forces, the resilience and ingenuity of black natives in using poisoned arrows as a defensive strategy left an enduring legacy. Today, this history stands a testament to the resourcefulness and brilliance of African warriors, whose knowledge of nature and combat allowed them to protect their people and lands against overwhelming odds.